Tonight, we are going back a little more than 50 years to a dirt road in Northern California, a hand painted wooden sign, and 120 acres of meadow and oak forest where a few dozen young people tried to build a brand new world from scratch. You have heard the legend of flowers, freedom, music, endless summer. Tonight, you will live the reality, the frost, the beans, the blistered hands, and the meetings that never, ever ended. Before we begin, if these sleepy journeys into the past help you rest, take 1 second to subscribe. It truly helps this channel grow. And leave a comment with any hippie stories your family still tells, or your own if you were there. A painted van, a festival, a commune, a summer that changed everything. I read every single one. Now dim the lights. Settle deep into your pillow. Let your breathing slow. It is the spring of 1970, and you are about to leave everything behind. You are 22 years old, and you grew up in a house that looked like every other house on the street. Your father caught the 7:40 train every morning in a gray suit and came home at 6 to a lawn he mowed in perfectly straight lines. Your mother kept a kitchen the color of butter with a freezer full of TV dinners and a percolator that never went cold. The whole neighborhood smelled like cut grass and charcoal briquettes, and everyone agreed, without ever quite saying it out loud, that this was the reward. This was what the whole century had been for. And for reasons you could not fully explain at the dinner table, it made you feel like you were suffocating. You were not alone. All across the country, in the late 1960s, an entire generation was quietly coming to the same conclusion, that the split-level house and the 30-year mortgage and the company pension were a beautiful cage. There were more young people in America at that moment than there had ever been. The baby boom had come of age all at once, 70 million strong, and the world they had been promised kept colliding with the world they actually saw. They saw it on the evening news every single night. The war in Vietnam came into the living room in color between commercials for dish soap. In December of 1969, the government held a draft lottery, live on television, birthdays pulled from a glass jar like bingo numbers, deciding whose sons would go. You sat on the carpet in front of the set and watched a man in a suit read out dates, and you did the math in your head, and the room felt very small. You had already lost the decade's gentler dreams by then. In 1968, in the space of 2 months, Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert Kennedy were both gone. Cities burned that summer. And in May of 1970, at a college in Ohio called Kent State, National Guardsmen fired on student protesters, and 4 young people never went home. You remember exactly where you were standing when you heard. Everyone your age does. Something in the country broke quietly that spring, and a lot of people your age simply stopped believing it could be fixed from the inside. So some of them decided to leave. Not to another country, though some did that too, but to another way of living entirely. The idea had been building for years. In 1967, the Summer of Love had pulled 100,000 young people to the Haight-Ashbury district of San Francisco with flowers in their hair. But the hate had curdled fast. Too many people, too little money, hard drugs moving in where the idealism used to be. By the autumn of that same year, the original dreamers were already holding a mock funeral through the streets, carrying a coffin marked with the words, Hippie, devoted son of mass media. The message was simple. The scene in the city is over. Don't come here. Go to the land instead. That was the new whisper moving through the generation. Get out of the cities. Buy cheap acreage in the hills with your friends. Grow your own food, build your own shelter, raise your children together, and live the way humans lived before the machine swallowed everything. They called it going back to the land, and by 1970, it was not a fringe fantasy. It was a migration. Researchers would later estimate that thousands of communes formed in those few years, from Vermont sugar bush farms to New Mexico mesas, and that hundreds of thousands of young Americans passed through them. On the floor of your rented room, there's a huge floppy paperback called the Whole Earth Catalog, part encyclopedia, part shopping guide, part scripture for this new movement. It has reviews of wood stoves and windmills, books on beekeeping and midwifery, and geodesic domes. Its motto reads like a dare, access to tools. Next to it sits a worn copy of Living the Good Life by Helen and Scott Nearing, an older couple who walked away from the city back in the 1930s and homesteaded in Vermont. Proof in hardcover that it could actually be done. You read these the way your grandparents read their Bible, slowly, repeatedly, underlining. And then one evening in April, a friend of a friend sits cross legged on your floor, just back from someplace up north. He talks about a piece of land past the last paved road, a farmhouse, a barn, a creek. 40 people, more or less, depending on the season. Gardens going in, goats, music every night. No bosses, no clocks, no rent, just work, shared. They'll feed anybody who shows up, he says. You just have to be willing to pick up a shovel. You lie awake that night listening to the traffic, and by morning the decision has somehow already been made, the way the big ones often are, quietly while you slept. You give notice at the job your father helped you get. You sell your records, your television, most of your clothes. What survives the purge fits in an army surplus duffel, 2 pairs of jeans, wool sweaters, a rain poncho, work boots, a sleeping bag, a harmonica you cannot really play, and a little over $80 folded into a sock. Your mother cries at the kitchen table. Your father shakes your hand like he is concluding a business arrangement that has gone badly and says, "You'll be back by Christmas." You hoist the duffel onto your shoulder. You are not entirely sure he is wrong. That is the part you never tell anyone. Here is the first thing to understand about finding a commune in 1970. There was no address to look up, no phone number to call. The whole movement ran on rumor. Word of mouth was the newspaper, a name scrawled on the bulletin board of a food co-op, a mimeographed directory called the Modern Utopian that tried heroically and hopelessly to keep a list of communities that formed and dissolved faster than anyone could print. Somebody's cousin knew somebody who had spent a month someplace with a name like Morning Star or Rainbow Ridge or Ahimsa Farm, and the directions were always the same genre of poetry. Take the highway north, turn off at the feed store, follow the dirt road uphill until the pavement gives up, look for the painted gate. You travel the way everyone your age travels that spring, with your thumb out. Hitchhiking in 1970 is not an act of desperation. It is practically public transit. Long haired kids line the on ramps of every highway in the West with cardboard signs and guitar cases, and the vehicles that stop for you are a rolling museum of the era. A rancher in a pickup who lectures you about haircuts but shares his sandwiches. A salesman who wants to know, genuinely wants to know, what it is you people are so upset about. And finally, inevitably, the bus. Every era has its cathedral. This one's a retired school bus with the seats torn out, painted in swirls of orange and green, curtains in the windows, a mattress in the back, and a name across the front where the school district used to be. This one is called Further Still in honor of a more famous bus. The driver wears a leather hat and introduces the other passengers like a ringmaster. Somebody hands you an orange. Somebody else is asleep in a hammock strung from the luggage racks. The whole vehicle smells of patchouli, engine oil, and wood smoke, which, as though you do not know it yet, the exact smell of the next 3 years of your life. The bus grinds north through the afternoon, off the highway, and onto a county road that follows a river, then off the county road and onto gravel, then off the gravel and onto two ruts of bare dirt, running up through oak trees and golden meadow grass. And then the gate. It is exactly as advertised, two posts and a sagging cattle gate, hung with a hand painted sign. The letters are rainbow colored, faded by a full year of weather already, and they say, "Welcome home." Below that smaller, someone has added, "Close the gate, goats." You will learn later that gates like this one divided the whole commune world into two philosophies. Some communities practiced what was called open land, the radical idea, preached most famously at Morning Star Ranch down in Sonoma County, that no human being could be turned away from the earth, that land access was a birthright, and that whoever arrived, arrived. It was a beautiful idea, and it nearly destroyed every place that tried it, because 100 acres can absorb 40 dreamers, but not 400. Other communities had learned to guard the door. At those, a new arrival got a trial period, a week, a month, and a frank conversation about what they could contribute. Some places would ask you, gently but seriously, to move along by Sunday. There were rude words in the movement for people who ate but did not work, and every commune knew them. This place, you will discover, sits somewhere in the middle. Anyone can visit. Staying is a different conversation. But this afternoon, you know none of that. This afternoon, you are just a person with a duffel bag standing at a wooden gate at the end of a dirt road, heart going like a rabbit. The bus honks twice and rumbles away behind you, off to wherever buses like that go. You unlatch the gate and close it for the goats and walk up through the meadow. The land opens as you climb. A weathered farmhouse, white paint gone gray, with a porch full of firewood and drying laundry. A barn twice its size, leaning philosophically. A garden the size of a baseball infield, staked and stringed with 3 figures bent over the rows. A canvas teepee. A half-finished geodesic dome, its bare triangular bones catching the late sun, looking like the skeleton of a fallen moon. A dog reaches you first, some shepherd mix, delighted official greeter. Then a small child with no shirt, no shoes, and an expression of total sovereignty, who looks up at you and asks, "Did you bring anything?" You are still formulating an answer when a woman straightens up in the garden, shades her eyes, and waves like she has known you your entire life. Dinner's at sundown, she calls. You can put your stuff in the barn. That is the whole interview. That is the entire immigration process into your new country. You stand there in the gold evening light between the gate and the garden with everything you own on your shoulder. And for one long moment, the feeling in your chest is not excitement and not fear, but something older and stranger than either. The feeling of a door closing softly behind you and another one standing open ahead, and you walk up the hill toward the smell of wood smoke and onions into the rest of your life. Dinner at the commune happens in the farmhouse kitchen, which you understand within 30 seconds is not just a room, but the beating heart of the entire enterprise. It is warm here, the only truly warm room you will find tonight, because of a massive black wood burning cook stove that somebody's grandmother probably cursed at 50 years ago. Every surface is occupied, bunches of drying herbs hanging from nails, mason jars of grains lined up like a science exhibit, a dish rack the size of a rowboat, and a hand lettered sign over the sink that says your mother does not live here. 40 people, more or less, eat in shifts and circles, on chairs, on benches, on the floor, on the porch steps. Before the food is served, everyone joins hands, and there is a long breath of silence, and then a low hum that swells and fades. Nobody explains it. Nobody needs to. Then the pots come around: brown rice, a stew of vegetables and beans, flat rounds of bread cooked on the stovetop, and a jar of honey that travels the room like a sacred relic. You are introduced approximately 30 times. The names come in two varieties. There are the given names: Peter, Marilyn, Susan, Carl, belonging mostly to the founders, the slightly older ones who actually signed the papers on this land. And there are the chosen names: Coyote, Sunshine, Feather, a quiet bearded man everyone simply calls Bear, names people picked up somewhere between the person they were raised to be and the person they are trying to become. Nobody asks for your last name. Last names are for the straight world, for draft boards and bank loans. Up here, you are just yourself, and possibly, eventually, someone new. After dinner, dishes. You volunteer, which earns you visible approval and your first commune lesson. Hot dishwater must be heated on the stove, one kettle at a time, because there is no water heater. There is, in fact, no electricity in most of the buildings. The farmhouse has a few lines run to it, and there is a generator in the barn that works on alternate weekends, but the true light of this place is fire. Kerosene lamps with sooty glass chimneys, candle lanterns, the orange mouth of the stove. By that light, the evening unfolds the way you will learn every evening unfolds. Guitars come out. There are always guitars, in roughly the same ratio as dogs. Someone plays a song everyone knows, and the kitchen sings it in ragged, unembarrassed harmony. A game of chess by lamplight. A woman patching jeans with squares from other deader jeans. The small sovereign child from the meadow, asleep across two laps, is carried off to bed by what appears to be a committee, and then somebody hands you a lantern and walks you to the barn. New people sleep in the barn loft. This is universal law, or close to it. You climb a ladder into a dark, cavernous space that smells overwhelmingly of hay, dust, and the goats muttering below, and your guide gestures at the sea of loose straw and mismatched mattresses where 5 or 6 other bodies are already burrowed in. Anywhere that's not taken, she says, and leaves you the lantern. Here is the first myth to set gently on the shelf: privacy. You had imagined, vaguely, some rustic little cabin of your own. What actually exists is this loft, shared with strangers, whose snoring you will soon know like family. On a commune, privacy is the first possession you surrender, before your record collection, before your old name. You will eat in a crowd, work in a crowd, bathe, when bathing happens, in a creek in a crowd. Couples seeking solitude walk out into the meadow at night, and everyone politely pretends the meadow is invisible. In time, if you stay, you may build 4 walls of your own. Tonight, you get straw. You zip into your sleeping bag, still wearing your sweater, because the second myth dies fast too. California is not warm. Not up here, not at night, not in April. The day's heat drains out of the hills the moment the sun drops, and by midnight, your breath is a small ghost in the lantern light. You blow out the flame and lie back. The darkness is total in a way you have never experienced. City darkness is gray. This is black velvet. And the silence is not silence at all. It is layered, frogs in their thousands down by the creek, wind moving through the oaks like slow surf, a goat rearranging itself below you with a grumble, the faint heartbeat of a drum from somewhere near the teepee, and underneath it all a vast humming nothing that you slowly realize is just the sound of no traffic, no wires, no machines. The sound of the world with the century switched off. Somewhere in the straw, a stranger murmurs in a dream. You think, I have absolutely no idea what I am doing. You think, my hands have never done a real day's work in my life. You think, I will give it a week. Everyone thinks that the first night. It is practically the official motto of the barn loft. Give it a week. Half the people who think it are gone in 5 days back down the dirt road to the world of hot showers. The other half are still saying 1 more week, 3 years later. You pull the sleeping bag over your ears, and the frogs sing you down into the dark, and you sleep harder than you have slept since you were the age of the sovereign child, and you have no idea yet which half you are. You are woken at 5:30 by a rooster who is technically standing on you. This is your formal introduction to the single most important truth of commune life, the truth that flattens every romantic notion within 72 hours of arrival. The Back to the Land movement was a mass migration of young people from the most convenient society in human history into a way of life their great grandparents had celebrated escaping. The revolution, it turns out, is chores. Consider water. In your parents' house, water was a fact, like air. Here, water is a project. It arrives by gravity from a spring up the hill through an aging line that clogs, freezes, and mysteriously sulks, and when the line is down, water arrives in buckets, carried by hand, 200 yards, uphill on the return. Every gallon for cooking, washing, dishes, and goats travels by human arm. Within a month, your right shoulder will sit visibly lower than your left, and you will have opinions about bucket handles the way you once had opinions about bands. Consider heat. Warmth is not a thermostat. It is a woodpile, and the woodpile is a diary of somebody's labor. Every stick was felled, bucked, split, hauled, and stacked by a person you can name. The kitchen stove must be lit before anything else can happen. Coffee, oatmeal, dishwater, morale, So someone rises in the dark to do it, and you learn to love that anonymous someone with your whole cold heart. On this first morning, you stumble down the ladder into a barnyard smoking with mist. The valley below is a lake of fog, with oak crowns floating in it, and the light coming over the ridge is the color of the honey jar. You stand there with your city lungs full of cold, sage smelling air, and something in your chest turns over like an engine catching. Remember this moment. On the bad days, and they are coming in quantity, this is the moment you will take out and hold. The outhouse deserves its paragraph. It sits a discreet distance downhill, a plywood sentry box with a crescent moon cut in the door by some romantic, and using it in the pre dawn chill is a spiritual practice no guru ever advertised. There is a bag of lime and a scoop, and a coffee can of catalog pages, and a spider you will come to know socially. You will miss indoor plumbing with a physical ache for about 6 weeks. Then, strangely, you mostly won't. Breakfast is oatmeal from a pot the size of a kettle drum, sweetened with honey if the honey is holding out, paled with powdered milk. Around the long table, the day organizes itself. Some communes run on pure spontaneity. Do your own thing, trust the vibe. And those communes, you will learn, are the ones with dirty dishes to the ceiling and a garden full of weeds, because it turns out nobody's own thing is scrubbing pots. This one has evolved a middle path, a chore wheel drawn on a big piece of cardboard, its very existence the scar tissue of 100 arguments. Kitchen crew, garden crew, water and wood, goats, kids. A man with a gray streaked beard, Carl, one of the founders, a former engineer, looks you over, takes in the soft hands and the brand new boots, and hands you a splitting maul with the tenderness of a father handing over car keys. Woodpile, he says. Tom will show you. Aim for the crack, not the middle. And stand, he adds, already walking away, so you keep all your toes. You spend that first morning discovering that splitting firewood is 1 part strength and 9 parts geometry, that a maul bounced off a knotty round makes a sound like a church bell of failure, and that blisters form, swell, and burst on a schedule of their own choosing. Tom, 19, from Ohio, on the land 8 months, coaches you with the deep satisfaction of a man who was himself the new guy until 20 minutes ago. By 10 o'clock, your hands are wrecked and your shirt is soaked, and you have produced a stack of split oak roughly the size of a large dog. By noon, the stack is knee high, and something has shifted. There is a rhythm in it now, set, swing, crack, toss, and your mind, with nothing to schedule and nothing to buy, has gone somewhere quiet and wide. The maul drops. The wood opens with that clean, tearing sigh. The pieces smell of tannin and rain. Nobody is watching you. Nobody is grading you. The work is simply, visibly there. And then, because of you, done. Your father worked 30 years and could rarely point to a single object and say, I made that. Tonight, someone will cook dinner over wood you split, and you will feel the heat of it on your face and know exactly where it came from. No clocks up here, people keep telling you, and it sounds like a slogan until you actually live it. The sun runs the schedule now. Up with the light, big work in the cool morning, slow through the golden afternoon, done when the ridge swallows the sun. Time stops being something you spend and starts being something you stand inside. At the lunch break, You sit against the barn wall with bread and cheese, aching in muscles you did not know you had leased, and Tom settles beside you, squinting at your dog sized, knee high monument of split oak. Not bad, he says, meaning it. Winter'll take about 4 chords. You look at your morning's work. You do the math. The math is very, very bad. Tom grins and hands you the maul. Let us talk about what you will actually eat for the next 3 years, because no part of commune life has been more thoroughly mythologized or was more thoroughly ruled by one blunt fact. The fact is this: you are poor. Not student poor, not between jobs poor, but genuinely, structurally poor, in the way of people who have chosen to live outside the money economy without quite replacing it yet. The commune's entire food budget for 40 people might be a few $100s a month, stretched by garden produce that will not amount to much this first year. And so, the cuisine that history remembers as hippie food, the brown rice, the beans, the dense whole grain bread, the oatmeal, was not, at first, a philosophy. It was arithmetic. Brown rice and pinto beans, bought in 50-pound sacks, are close to the cheapest complete nourishment on earth. Philosophy arrived afterward, the way it often does, to explain what necessity had already decided. But what a philosophy it became! Half the kitchen crew is devoted to macrobiotics, a Japanese-inspired way of eating that swept the counterculture and holds brown rice as very nearly a sacrament. Chew each mouthful 50 times, they tell you, and mean it. The other half swears by a cookbook that came out of a Zen monastery down the coast, the Tasajara Bread Book, which is quietly teaching an entire American generation, raised on sliced white bread in plastic sleeves, how to bake actual bread with their actual hands. The commune's copy is swollen with water damage and flour, annotated in 4 handwritings, and treated with more reverence than any other object on the property, except the truck. Your first loaves, you should know, will be bricks. Whole wheat is unforgiving. Wood ovens lie about their temperature, and yeast is a living creature with moods. The kitchen elders will inspect your bricks, thump them like melons, and tell you kindly that everyone's first loaves feed the chickens. By autumn, you will pull brown, crackling, honest loaves from that oven and feel a pride entirely out of proportion to baked goods. Then there is the soybean, the humble, miraculous soybean, about which the movement is developing an almost mystical enthusiasm. Cheap beyond belief and dense with protein, it is the answer to the vegetarian question that hangs over every commune kitchen. Down in Tennessee, a caravan of San Francisco hippies who founded a huge commune called The Farm are building a whole soy dairy, soy milk, soy ice cream, and a fermented cake called tempeh, and their recipes travel the commune network like folk songs. When the first jar of home-brewed soy milk is produced in your kitchen, it is tasted in ceremonial silence. It tastes like beans. Everyone agrees it is the future. Both things, remarkably, will turn out to be true. Decades from now, the tofu in every American supermarket will trace its family tree straight through kitchens like this one. Provisioning is a weekly expedition called the Town Run. 2 people take the truck down the mountain with the kitty, the communal cash box, and a list. They hit the granary for sacks of grain, the day-old rack at the bakery, and the food conspiracy, a buying club where a dozen communes and co-op households pool orders to buy wholesale, a scheme that is, at this very moment all over the country, quietly inventing the modern food co op. They return like sailors from a voyage, and unloading the truck draws a crowd. 50 pounds of oats is greeted with genuine joy. A crate of dented peanut butter jars with euphoria. Cooking dinner for 40 on a wood stove is not a chore. It is a full day's occupation for a crew of 3, and your rotation comes up weekly. You will learn to keep a firebox at bread heat, to stir a pot you could bathe a toddler in, to slice onions by the dozen while someone reads poetry at you, and to ring the dinner bell with the sober self importance of a church sexton. You will also learn the kitchen's shadow side, the eternal cold war over dishwater, the mysterious vanishing of the good knife, and the great honey audit of your first summer, which we will not discuss. 2 more truths, and then the bell. First, hunger, real hunger, visits this life. Late winter is the hungry season, when the root cellar is down to sprouting potatoes, and the meals narrow to oatmeal, rice, and whatever the chickens can spare. There will be a stretch of weeks when your body burns more than the kitchen can put back, when you dream, actually dream, vividly, guiltily, about your mother's pot roast. Voluntary poverty, you will learn, still keeps all the features of the regular kind. But second, there is August. There is the month the garden finally detonates, when the zucchini arrive like an invading army, and the tomatoes come in faster than the canning jars can be boiled, when dinner is corn picked 40 minutes ago, and beans picked 20, and the long table on the porch groans, and the honey is passed without rationing, and someone carries out a wheel of goat cheese you made, you personally, with your own scarred hands, and the whole ridiculous, exhausting system justifies itself in 1 golden hour of plenty. You will remember those dinners for the rest of your life. Every person at that table will. The bread was heavy. Nobody minded. It was warm, and there was enough, and you had earned every bite of it twice. Now we come to the tenderest myth of all, the one at the very center of the dream, and the one that reality dismantled first, fastest, and most completely. The myth said, we will live off the land. We will grow our own food. The reality said, you are 40 children of the suburbs, and not one of you knows what a potato plant looks like. This cannot be overstated. The back to the land generation was almost to a person the first generation of their families raised entirely without agriculture. Their grandparents had fled the farm. Their parents had perfected the escape. And now here they came, back up the mountain with a whole earth catalog under one arm and a shovel they had just learned to hold, attempting from a standing start the single most knowledge-dense occupation in human history. The results, that first year, were biblical, just not in the good way. The spring plantings went into cold ground too early and rotted, so everything was replanted late and got caught by the summer heat. The tomatoes were lovingly set out in the shade, where tomatoes sulk. Nobody thinned the carrots. Thinning felt cruel. An actual argument was held about it. So the carrot bed produced 1,000 green hairbrushes with roots like pencil leads. The corn went in as a single elegant row, which is the one formation in which corn refuses to pollinate. And in one legendary June night, deer came through the unfenced garden like a scythe and took the beans, the lettuce, the chard, and the peas, leaving 40 revolutionaries staring at stubble. The fence, 8 feet, scavenged wire, crooked as a dog's leg, went up the following week. Every commune garden in America has a fence like it, and every fence has the same story. It was built exactly one disaster too late. What saved you was the neighbor. Every surviving commune has one, and this is a truth the legend never includes. His name is Amos. He is 71. He has ranched the next valley since before your parents were born, and he thinks your hair is ridiculous. He first appeared at the gate that summer, ostensibly about a stray goat, and stood looking at the wreckage of the garden for a long, terrible minute. This man who had watched neighbors survive the depression on ground like this, and something in him apparently could not stand it, because he came back 2 days later with a truckload of aged manure and began, without any announcement, to teach. Plant by the soil temperature, not the calendar. Water deep and rare, not shallow and daily. This ridge gets frost 2 weeks after the valley floor, nothing tender before May. Manure in the fall, not the spring. You get one crop of lettuce before the heat. Stop mourning. Plant chard. He would accept no payment except bread, even the brick era's bread, and he never once said the obvious thing, which was that everything you were painstakingly rediscovering, his grandmother had known by heart. And rediscover you did, because the movement was nothing if not studious. The bookshelf by the seed box grew all year. Government bulletins from the county extension office, dog-eared organic gardening magazines, a beloved book by an old woman named Ruth Stout, who preached burying the whole garden in a permanent quilt of mulch hay and letting the worms do the digging. Compost, that great alchemy of turning garbage and manure into next year's soil, became a competitive sport. The pile was turned, watered, argued over, and monitored like a patient in intensive care. You learned words your grandparents knew and your parents had shed: loam, tilth, hardpan, cover crop. You learned that the garden is not a factory but a conversation, and that the soil answers slowly in years. Year 1, the garden fed you for perhaps 6 weeks and taught you everything by killing most of it. Year 2, the fence held, the timing was closer, Amos's manure had gone to work, and the root cellar half filled, potatoes in bins of sand, onions in braids, winter squash ranked on shelves like ammunition. Year 3, and hold this thought, because we will return to it, Year 3, the garden actually, genuinely worked. A quarter-acre of dark, living, hand-built soil produced most of what the kitchen needed from July to Christmas. September became a canning marathon, the kitchen fogged with steam for a solid week, every flat surface cooling with jars, tomatoes, beans, corn relish, blackberry jam from the creek thickets, until the pantry shelves looked, for the first time, like a promise that would be kept. The bitter footnote is that most people never saw Year 3. The average commune resident stayed months, not years, which meant the land's whole learning curve kept resetting as the students left and new ones arrived at 0. The soil remembered. The people mostly were passing through. But here is what else grew in those wrecked and resurrected gardens, though nobody could see it yet. The compost methods, the horror of chemical sprays, the seed saving, the worship of soil, all of it was quietly seeding a movement that would outlive nearly every commune that practiced it. The organic farms and farmers markets your grandchildren will stroll through began here in fenced too late gardens tended by people who had to be taught which end of the carrot went down. The revolution failed to feed itself for 2 years running. Then it learned, and what it learned, it never forgot. Every commune, sooner or later, acquires animals, usually sooner, usually at auction, usually before anyone has read the relevant chapter. The goats came first, as goats do. Someone brought back 2 does from a farm sale for almost nothing, on the theory that goats were basically self operating milk machines, and within a season, the herd was 6, and the commune had entered into the oldest relationship in agriculture: total, mutual, exasperated devotion. Here is what nobody tells you about goats: they are brilliant, genuinely, provably brilliant, and they deploy every watt of it against fences. A goat studies a fence the way a safecracker studies a vault, patiently, professionally, certain there is a way. And there is always a way. You will find goats in the garden, on the porch, on the roof of the truck cab, standing in the exact geometric center of a freshly planted bed with an expression of complete innocence. They eat the laundry off the line, not all of it, just whatever was loved most. And they open gate latches with their lips, which is why every latch on the property has been rebuilt twice and now requires opposable thumbs and a short prayer. They also, of course, get named after philosophers. The matriarch is Simone. There is a Plato who is not bright, and a small, vicious yearling called Nietzsche, and the naming committee considers this the finest work it has ever done. Milking is where the romance meets the bucket. The does must be milked at dawn and at dusk, every single day, in rain, in frost, on solstices, on your birthday, when you are sick, when you are heartbroken. The udder does not care. You learn on Simone, who suffers beginners with heavy sighs. The grip is nothing like you imagined. It is a rolling squeeze, wrist and forearm, and for the first 2 weeks, your hands cramp into claws, and the bucket collects an insulting inch. Then one cold morning, the rhythm arrives from somewhere below thought, and the milk rings against the steel in long ropes, and Simone turns her head and gives you a look you will insist forever contained approval. Warm milk, strained through cloth, yogurt in jars by the stove. And the day the first wheel of goat cheese comes out of the press, white, crumbly, tasting faintly of the meadow itself, is a national holiday, ranked in the commune's memory just below the well and just above the truck running 2 months straight. The chickens are less philosophical. A flock of 2 dozen patrols the yard in a feathered mob, converting kitchen scraps and bugs into the commune's only reliable luxury: eggs. Gathering them is the children's job and the visitors' delight, a daily Easter that never stops being slightly miraculous. The political crisis of the poultry program is the rooster, magnificent, paranoid, violent, who has drawn blood from 3 residents and rules the path to the outhouse like a toll bridge. The question of whether a vegetarian commune can, in good conscience, eat its own tyrant will consume, no exaggeration, 4 full meetings. He is eventually pardoned, exiled to a farm down the valley, and becomes, everyone agrees, that farmer's problem. Then there is the cow. The cow was an act of hubris. Somebody came home from the auction barn having bid $11 on a gentle brown jersey, a triumph, until it emerged that a cow gives 4 gallons a day, twice a day, through a tap nobody present could operate, and that 4 gallons of anything twice a day is a career. It was Amos again who saved the situation, leaning on the stall rail and laughing longer than was strictly kind, before teaching a rotating crew of former philosophy majors the ancient forearm language of milking a cow for real. Her name is Bess. The commune is, by unanimous vibe, her staff. Bees came the second spring, 2 hives at the meadow's edge, tended in a veiled hat by Feather, who talks to them, which the books actually recommend. Everyone is stung, everyone pretends it is nothing. The honey, spun out in September, golden and thick with the taste of wildflowers, settles the argument about whether it was worth it before the argument can begin. And the dogs, there are always the dogs, 6 or 9 or 11 of them, a loose confederacy that greets every arrival, sleeps in every doorway, steals one entire dinner off the porch table in a heist still discussed with grudging respect, and hears, long before you do, every car on the valley road. What the animals actually give the commune, though, is bigger than milk and eggs, and you only see it in your second winter. Ideals can bend, schedules can dissolve, people can talk an afternoon into philosophy and let the woodpile wait. But the animals eat before you eat, at dawn, no matter what, and their needs run a cold iron thread of discipline through the whole dreaming enterprise. On the gray mornings, when nothing else can get the land out of bed, the goats do. There is a moment you will keep. February, before light, sleet coming sideways. You are hauling steaming water to the trough, boots ruined, fingers burning with cold, muttering words that would scandalize the meditation circle. And Simone leans her whole warm side against your legs while she drinks, easy as furniture, breathing her hay-sweet breath into the dark. And you stand there in the sleet, being leaned on, trusted entirely by something that has no idea what you gave up to be here, and no opinion about it either. It helps more than you can say. Sooner or later, if you stay, you will want walls of your own. And that brings us to the question of how a generation with no carpenters built itself a landscape. Start with the icon, the geodesic dome. No shape says commune like it, that faceted half-sphere of triangles, equal parts spaceship and soap bubble. The inspiration came from the visionary engineer of Buckminster Fuller, who preached that triangles were the strongest shape in the universe, and that a dome enclosed the most space with the least material. The spark came from a tiny artist's commune on the Colorado prairie called Drop City, founded back in 1965, whose members built their domes out of the most American material imaginable. Car roofs, chopped from junkyard automobiles with axes, at a couple of dollars per car. It was audacious, gorgeous, and world famous within 2 years. Fuller himself sent the droppers an award, and every commune in the country, yours included, promptly wanted one. Here is what the photographs never showed. The domes leaked, not some of them. Essentially, all of them. A dome has dozens of joints and seams, every one angled to catch the rain, sealed with whatever caulk or tar the budget allowed, flexing with every temperature swing. The commune's dome, the beautiful skeleton you saw your first evening, was eventually skinned in shingles and plastic and hope, and it leaked, was resealed at equinox and solstice ceremonially, and it leaked, grew a sophisticated internal ecosystem of coffee cans and gutters, and it leaked. People loved it anyway. People slept in it anyway under the drips, inside all that geometry, because it was beautiful and because on clear nights the skylight at the crown held stars. Even the movement's own Bible makers came around. The man whose dome book had taught thousands to build them spent a few years watching them drip and buckle, and then published a bigger, humbler book called Shelter, full of the vernacular wisdom the pioneers had skipped the first time: barns, cabins, yurts, sod houses, the shapes Rain already agreed with. The whole arc of the movement is in those two book titles. But mostly, the commune was built of salvage, and salvage was a way of life. The county dump was the department store, visited weekly, mined for windows, hinges, stovepipe, and the occasional miracle. Old barns and farmhouses, slated for demolition, were taken down by hand for their lumber, nail by nail. You will spend one entire rainy autumn week pulling nails out of 100-year-old planks and straightening them on an anvil, and you will come to find it. This is embarrassing but true, deeply soothing. Redwood Mill ends, bought by the truckload for almost nothing. Cedar shakes split by hand from salvaged rounds, which is exactly as slow as it sounds. Out of that stream of rescued material, you build your own place in your second spring. A cabin, 8 feet by 12, frame of true dimension barn lumber, siding of mismatched planks weathered to 5 shades of silver, one window from the dump facing east, because Amos said morning light in a house matters more than size. It has a sleeping loft you can only sit up in, a shelf, a hook, a candle lantern, and a door you made yourself that sticks in the rain with a particular groan you would recognize in your sleep 40 years from now, in a crowd of 1,000 doors. The first night in it, alone inside walls that exist because you existed, you understand something about shelter that no rented room ever taught you. You should know that the county did not always smile on this architecture. Building codes, septic rules, and occupancy limits sat waiting at the bottom of the mountain, and inspectors did come up the road, polite, armed with clipboards, red tagging structures that decades of pioneers before you had raised without asking anyone. Some of it was fair. The codes exist because people once died in fires and typhoid summers. Some of it was plainly a lever used by counties that simply wanted the freaks gone. Down in Sonoma, the open land pioneers of Morning Star Ranch were dragged through the courts for years over their shacks and shelters, and county bulldozers flattened the settlement not once, but repeatedly. People up on your ridge speak of it quietly, the way you speak of weather that might come your way. So the commune learned the border dance, the big improvements documented and permitted, the small cabins officially storage, the outhouse rebuilt properly, everyone very courteous when the truck with the county seal grinds up the hill. And above it all, literally, stands the big house, the 2-story addition to the farmhouse that was begun with enormous ceremony the summer before you arrived, and that will still not be finished the day you leave. Every commune in America has one, the eternal project, framed in a burst of collective fire, stalled at the hard parts, resumed each spring by whoever's enthusiasm is newest. Its bare studs gray in the weather, swallows nest in the rafters. The children play fort in it. Couples climb to the unfinished second floor to watch the sunset through the framing. It is easy to laugh at the big house, and everyone does, but you will come to see it differently. It is the commune's portrait of itself, honest as a mirror. Too ambitious, half built, weathering, alive with swallows, and absolutely certain every single spring that this is the year it gets a roof. Now you must attend your first meeting. Bring a cushion, bring snacks, cancel your evening. Here is the founding paradox of every commune in America. A group of people who fled their parents' world specifically to escape rules, bosses, and bureaucracy discovered, usually within the first month, that 40 humans sharing land, money, food, and a single truck generate more governance questions per day than a small municipality. The commune's answer to this paradox was not to appoint leaders, because leaders were the disease being fled. The answer was the meeting. Meetings are held in the farmhouse living room by lamplight, everyone in a circle on the floor, and they operate, as most communes did, by consensus. Not a majority vote, consensus. The rule is beautiful and terrible in equal measure. Nothing is decided until everyone can live with it, and any single person can block. Voting, the thinking goes, means a winning team and a losing team, and the losing team eventually leaves. Consensus means nobody loses. What it also means, you learn on night one, is that nobody goes to bed. Your first meeting runs 4.5 hours. The agenda, chalked on a board, reads like a poem about entropy. Dogs, again. Dishes, again. Visitors, limits. The truck, money. See, truck. The item called the truck concerns whether to spend nearly the whole treasury on a rebuilt engine, and it will be continued across 3 separate meetings, generating along the way a 40-minute philosophical debate about whether the commune should own machines at all, during which the two people who actually keep the truck alive sit in eloquent silence. There is a talking stick, a piece of driftwood, passed hand to hand, holder speaks, everyone else listens. In principle, it creates order. In practice, it creates ballads. Some people hold the driftwood the way other people hold the phone with their mother, at length, circling, in no hurry to reach a point. The era's encounter group culture has soaked into the process too, so agenda items about firewood have a way of becoming testimony about feelings, childhoods, and the couple who broke up last month and are both present, radiating. And here is the thing you do not expect: it half works. Because buried in the endless process is something you have never once seen in the straight world. People are listened to here, actually, fully listened to, at ruinous cost and hours, by a whole room. The shyest person on the land can stop 40 people in their tracks with one sentence of honest objection, and the objection will be taken seriously, and sometimes the shy person is right. You watched your father absorb decisions from bosses for 30 years without once being asked his opinion. Up here, opinion is the entire operating system, but you also start to see the machinery under the rug, because when a group refuses to name any leaders, it does not actually have no leaders. It has hidden ones. Decisions that never reach the circle get made anyway, in the kitchen at dawn, in the truck on the town run, on Carl's porch. Carl, the engineer, who holds the land's mortgage in his name. Marilyn, who has been here since the first week and carries the whole history in her head. When they trade a look during a meeting, matters resolve. Nobody voted for them. Nothing can remove them. A young feminist named Jo Freeman is writing an essay about exactly this dynamic, the tyranny of structurelessness. And when a mimeographed copy reaches the commune a couple of years from now, it will be read aloud in the circle and land like a diagnosis pinned to a door. The structureless group, she argues, is ruled by friendship networks and founders, invisibly, and the only cure is honest, accountable structure. Some communities, you learn through the grapevine, have swallowed that medicine from the start. At Twin Oaks, an intentional community in Virginia, inspired by a behaviorist utopian novel, they run the whole society on a labor credit system, every kind of work logged and balanced, planners and managers rotating through defined roles, policy in a binder anyone can read. Commune purists sniff that it sounds like an insurance office in the woods. But Twin Oaks, note well, pays its bills, feeds its people, and, spoiler from the far future, will still be quietly thriving when nearly every purist commune of this era is a real estate listing and a box of photographs. Your commune never goes that far, but it evolves the way they all do or die. Meetings capped at 2 hours, aspirationally, a rotating facilitator, small standing crews empowered to just decide things about goats and gardens without convening the nation. And once, you see the whole absurd apparatus justify itself completely. The second summer, the spring falters, and the land faces its first true crisis: water. The meeting that follows runs one entire Sunday, driftwood circling, every fear spoken, every option walked through: haul water forever, drill and go into debt, or dig a well by hand at a site the old maps and Amos both favor. And somewhere past dusk, without a vote, the room simply arrives. You can feel it arrive like weather. At yes, the well, by hand, together. 6 weeks of pick and shovel work later, in front of the whole cheering commune, muddy water rises in a bucket from ground you chose as one mind. Nobody who drank from that well ever fully gave up on meetings again. They just kept bringing snacks. We are just about halfway up the mountain now, drowsy traveler. If you are still awake down there, drifting somewhere between the woodpile and the well, press that like button, softly, so more night owls can find their way to this land. And if sleep has not quite taken you, tell me in the comments where in the world you are listening from tonight. Now, back to the commune. The fire is low, and there is more to tell. Here is a question the legend never answers, so let us answer it honestly. What did a commune actually live on? Because the land was not free. This land carries a mortgage, $9,000, held in Carl's name, payments due with the seasons, plus property taxes, truck parts, kerosene, flour, boots, and the 100 small leaks through which money escapes even the most principled boat. The commune has seceded from the economy, the way a rowboat secedes from the ocean. So the money came from everywhere, in trickles, and every trickle had its own politics. It came first from savings. Everyone arrived with something, and everyone's something ran out. It came from parents, checks folded into newsy letters, cash pressed into palms at Christmas visits, and nobody talked about it much, because the revolution being partially funded by the fathers, it was fleeing was a joke everyone was too polite to finish. Every commune also carried its trust fund rumor, the member whose family money quietly covered the tax bill in bad years. On your land, the rumor is true, and the member is the least assuming person on the property, and you will not learn the whole of it for years. It came from the government. This is the part that got argued about at the time and ever after. Plenty of commune members drew food stamps or unemployment, and the movement split right down the middle about it. One camp said taking state money while denouncing the state was hypocrisy in its purest form. The other camp said the war machine owed them, and beans bought with food stamps tasted like reparations. The meetings on this topic were long even by local standards, and resolved, as the hard ones always were, by an uneasy live and let live. It came, more happily, from craft. The counterculture was building its own economy with its own hands, and the commune plugged in wherever it could. Candles dipped in the barn through the autumn, sold to head shops in the city before Christmas. Leather belts and sandals, macrame, pottery from the wheel in the woodshed, honey and goat cheese at the Saturday flea market, where the commune's stall, barefoot, cheerful, underpriced, becomes a small local institution. None of it makes real money. All of it together, in a good month, makes the mortgage payment, and there is deep satisfaction in that arithmetic. And it came from wage work, which is the irony nobody photographs. Commune members picked apples and pears through the valley harvests, cut and sold firewood, dug ditches, and pulled seasonal shifts at the mill or the cannery, long-haired dropouts punching the straight world's clock a few weeks at a time, pooling the checks, then climbing back up the mountain to freedom. A few communes elsewhere are learning to aim higher and build actual businesses. Word travels of Twin Oaks in Virginia, weaving rope hammocks into a real income. The lesson, wherever it is learned, is the same. The communes that figure out money survive, and the ones too pure to touch it do not. All of which brings us down the mountain to town. Town is 11 miles and one entire civilization away. Town is where the granary is, and the laundromat, and the hardware store, and every other Saturday you are in it, and it is complicated. You feel the stairs the moment the truck parks, long hair and patched jeans moving down a sidewalk of crew cuts and Sunday hats. The barber shop goes quiet as you pass, which is its own kind of comment. Some of it stays at stairs, some of it does not. There are towns in this valley where commune kids get shoved outside taverns, and a sheriff's deputy who finds reasons to stop the truck, check the taillights, take his time with the licenses. The county's true feelings, as you have seen, arrive by bulldozer elsewhere and by clipboard here. But that is only half the ledger, and the other half matters more. The granary owner extends the commune credit through your worst winter because, as he puts it, not looking up from the scale, your money spends and you pay eventual. The librarian sets aside every returned book on canning and carpentry. The pharmacist calls the farmhouse party line when the children's cough medicine comes in, and Amos plows your road every winter without ever once being asked, and mentions it to no one, and would be genuinely offended by thanks. What melts the border, in the end, is not ideology. It is competence and time. The town watches you people stay, through the first winter, then the second. It watches the garden go from wreckage to abundance, watches commune honey win a ribbon at the county fair, mostly to the commune's own astonishment. Hay gets bucked side by side in August, because hay does not care about haircuts. And one October evening in your third year, when a chimney fire takes the Hendersons' barn down the valley, the commune arrives 11 strong with shovels and buckets before the volunteer pumper does. And after that particular night, in that particular tavern, there is a particular table where nobody's hair is anyone's business anymore. Coins in a mason jar, checks from worried mothers, food stamps and candle money, apples picked at a stranger's wage, poured together, argued over, and spent on flour, taxes, and one endlessly rebuilt truck. That is what the dream ran on. That and the well. Now we come to the myth that deserved to be busted more than any other, and the bust did not come from historians decades later. It came from the women of the communes themselves in real time, and it changed America. The myth said, "We have left the old world behind. Its suits, its bosses, its rules for men, and its rules for women. Up here on the land, everyone is simply free." And then you actually look around the land in your first month and you notice something. You notice who is in the kitchen 3 meals a day and who is on the porch with the guitars talking about freedom. You notice who watches the children hour upon hour while the framing crew, all men, raises the big house walls to general applause. You notice that women's work was supposedly abolished, and yet the laundry, the mending, the cooking, the canning, the child care, and the endless dishes have all somehow remained, by pure coincidence, women's work. The commune fled the suburbs and then rebuilt in a farmhouse without electricity, a division of labor that would have looked perfectly familiar to a household of 1870, minus the appliances. It was not everywhere identical, and it was rarely malicious. It was worse than malicious in a way. It was unexamined. The men of the movement considered themselves liberated by definition and were, on the whole, sincerely oblivious. And the women, who chopped kindling before breakfast and kneaded bread for 40, and were then asked what they had done all day, began in kitchens exactly like yours to compare notes. Historians will later say it plainly. The women's liberation movement drew no small part of its fury and its clarity from women's experience inside the counterculture itself. The radical poet Robin Morgan lit one of the era's signal flares in 1970 with a furious essay called Goodbye to All That, aimed not at the suburbs, but at the movement's own men. Mimeographed copies traveled the commune circuit like weather. One reached your farmhouse in the second summer, and Marilyn read it standing up by the stove, and then read it again, aloud. What happened next on your land happened in 1,000 variations all over the map. The women began to meet. Tuesday nights in the teepee, no men, which by itself caused a week of porch-level grumbling that mostly proved the point. They called it, as the whole movement did, consciousness raising, a circle, a candle, and one at a time, each woman simply telling the truth about her days. How she came here for the same freedom he did. What she had done since sunrise, a itemized. What she had been told all her life, she could not learn. Engines, framing, money. The circle went around slowly, and the silences held whole biographies, and things said in that teepee rearranged people permanently. And then the Tuesday circle came down the hill and politely took the commune apart and rebuilt it. The chore wheel, that cardboard peace treaty, was redrawn so that every crew, kitchen, and framing, and firewood and kids rotated through everyone. The men learned to cook for 40, which produced 2 weeks of legendary catastrophes, and then, oddly, two of the best bakers on the land. And the women claimed the tools. You will watch Susan, who arrived here a faculty wife, who had been told her whole life that machinery was not for her, rebuild the truck's carburetor at the kitchen table with the manual propped against the honey jar and get it right, and start the engine to a porch full of cheering. By the third year, the best carpenter on the property is a woman named Ruth. The well pump answers to Marilyn alone, and none of this is remarked upon anymore, which is the whole victory. Elsewhere, the current ran stronger still. Some women left the mixed communes altogether and founded lands of their own, women only communities, some of which will quietly outlast almost everyone. And this is also the honest place to talk about the era's most famous phrase, free love. Yes, the commune's romances were unbound by the old rules, and the old hypocrisy of the suburbs was genuinely gone, and for many people that openness was a real liberation, honestly lived. But the myth left out the oldest fact in the world, which is that rules or no rules, human hearts kept right on being human. Jealousy did not dissolve, it just lost its vocabulary. The experiments in openness produced alongside their genuine joys a steady harvest of heartbreak, and the meetings that followed were longer than any meeting ever held about dogs or trucks. Most people, given total freedom, drifted toward the most ancient arrangement of all: two people, one cabin, ferociously ordinary devotion. And more than one woman noticed that free love, as actually practiced, had a way of being freest for the men, and said so on Tuesday in the teepee. Years from now, when historians interview the women of the commune generation, a pattern will repeat almost word for word. I went to the land looking for one revolution, they will say, and in the kitchen I found the other one, the one that was actually mine. The commune promised liberation and delivered at first a wood-fired version of the same old bargain. The women read the fine print by lamplight and renegotiated everything. There were children on the land before there was a garden, babies carried up the mountain in backpacks, toddlers born to the founders, and by your second year, one child who had been born right here in the farmhouse. On a rainy Tuesday, the whole commune remembers like a national founding. The dream, where children were concerned, was as radical as everything else. It takes a village, before anyone was saying it takes a village. Children here would not belong to two isolated adults in a sealed suburban box competing for attention with a television. They would grow up inside a whole tribe, a dozen laps, 20 teachers, endless siblings, free range in the deepest sense, raised by everyone, afraid of no one. And here is the honest report. A surprising amount of that dream actually worked. The commune kids, there are 8 of them in your era, ages 1 to 11, feral and magnificent, live a childhood that their suburban cousins could not imagine and will someday envy. They are barefoot from April to November. They know the creek's every pool, which they have named. They know where the fox dens and when the blackberries come in, and how to sit still enough that the deer keep grazing. They gather the eggs, an office they treat with enormous gravity. They milk goats before they can reliably tie shoes. The oldest, a solemn girl of 11 called Meadow, can bake a loaf, splint a chicken, and read a water level. And it was Meadow. You will tell this story forever, who actually taught you to milk, correcting your grip with the weary patience of a master craftsman saddled with a slow apprentice. No television, no advertisements, no locked doors between them and 120 acres, and always, everywhere, adults. That is the part visitors never quite grasp. A commune child scrapes a knee within earshot of five grown ups who care, falls asleep at the big table, and is carried to bed by whoever has arms. The love around them is genuinely plural. Decades from now, when grown commune kids are interviewed about their childhoods, that is the thing so many name first: the sheer number of people who loved us. School was where the dream met the county. In the early days, the commune ran its own mornings in the teepee, a shelf of books, lessons in whatever any adult actually knew, which produced 8-year-olds fluent in compost and constellations and shaky on long division. The county had opinions about that, as counties do. So most years, the kids ride the yellow bus down the mountain to the valley school, and the culture collision is the stuff of legend on both ends. There is the immortal first day exchange, in which a teacher taking roll looks up over her glasses and asks if Meadow has a real name, and Meadow, unbothered, replies that it is her real name, she can spell it, and would the teacher like her to? The commune kids arrive with homemade bread in their lunch pails and trade it. At exceptional rates of exchange, they are their parents' children for white bread bologna sandwiches, which they eat with the guilty joy of smugglers. Because that is the other honest half, and this history owes it to them. The children did not choose the revolution, they were born aboard it. Some of them ached quietly and sometimes not quietly for the ordinary, for television, for store-bought cereal, for a bedroom with a door, for parents whose names did not make the school secretary blink. And the commune's great weakness fell hardest on its smallest citizens, the turnover. Adults drifted in, became beloved, became for a season a third parent, and then one morning were simply gone down the road, the way adults on communes went. The grown-ups understood it as freedom. The children experienced it as weather they could not predict. Years on, the grown kids' verdict will come back mixed in exactly this way. The freedom was real, they will say, and so were the goodbyes. Their calendar, though, their calendar was unbeatable. Birthdays celebrated by 40 people with bonfires and terrible communal cakes. The solstice pageant each December, an annual epic written by Meadow and cast entirely with reluctant younger children, and one profoundly reluctant goat, performed in the barn by lantern light to a standing ovation that was never once in doubt. First tomato of the summer, cut into ceremonial slivers, so every kid got a piece. They were, whatever else was uncertain, never once bored, and never once unwitnessed. One evening in your last summer, you sit on the porch steps, shelling beans with Meadow, who is by then 13 and running the egg operation like a small ministry. Down in the meadow, the little ones are playing some game with rules, known only to them, shrieking in the gold light. You ask her, because you have been wondering, whether she ever wishes she lived like the town kids. She thinks about it seriously, the way she thinks about everything. Sometimes I want a television, she says at last, but they only have two parents. A pause. A bean hits the bowl. That seems like not very many. Somewhere below, a small voice calls her name. some dispute requiring a judge. She sets down the bowl, sighs like a 40-year-old, and goes. There is a chapter of commune life that the beautiful photographs skip entirely, and it begins with a hard sentence. Going back to nature meant going back to nature's diseases. The Back to the Land generation had grown up inside the greatest public health miracle in history, vaccinated, chlorinated, plumbed, inspected, and like all miracles that work perfectly, it had become invisible. Nobody's suburban childhood included the knowledge of why the well goes uphill of the outhouse and never ever downhill. That knowledge had been paid for generations back in funerals, and the movement, arriving on the land with its dishes and its springs and its beautiful innocence, had to buy a small portion of it back. The tuition was mostly paid in hepatitis. Across the commune world of these years, outbreaks of hepatitis a liver infection spread through contaminated water and shared cups and unwashed hands, moved from settlement to settlement along the same friendly network that moved songs and recipes. It arrived with a beloved visitor or lived quietly in an untested spring, and then a dozen people at once were yellow-eyed, exhausted, and flat on their backs for weeks. Your commune's turn comes in the second autumn. 6 people down, the kitchen suddenly a field hospital, Marilyn boiling every dish and rationing the good soap, the county nurse, bless her forever, driving up the bad road twice a week without ever once saying, "I told you so," though she had, in fact, told you so. Nobody on your land dies. Not every commune was so lucky, and the movement knew it, and the movement being studious above all things learned. This is the part history should be fair about. The same people who arrived not knowing which way water flowed became, within a few seasons, ferocious amateur sanitarians. The spring was tested, boxed, and fenced from the goats. The new outhouse went in properly, deep, limed, sited downhill, and far from the creek, built to the county pamphlet's exact letter by people who had recently used that pamphlet's pages for other purposes. Dishwater reached a rolling boil. The communal drinking dipper was retired with mock honors. Hand washing before kitchen shifts became the one law on the land that nobody ever was allowed to vibe their way past. The commune's health regime, by year 3, would have satisfied a Victorian matron. The rest of the medicine chest was a frontier blend, equal parts garden and county. For the small stuff, the land doctored itself, comfrey poultices on bruises, garlic and cayenne and honey for the winter coughs, yarrow, mint, chamomile from the herb bed, feather guarded like the bees. Lice and scabies made their rounds, as they will wherever 40 people share a barn loft, and were met with kerosene combs, boiled bedding, and a humor blacker than the stove. Some of the herbal lore worked, some of it merely kept everyone company while the body healed itself, and the commune slowly learned the oldest clinical skill there is, knowing which one you were looking at. Because when a child's fever climbed wrong, or an axe found a foot, or an appendix announced itself at 2 in the morning, the philosophy went in the wood box, and the truck went down the mountain to the county hospital, doing 60 on the gravel, and everyone was grateful, quietly, complicatedly grateful, that the straight world kept its lights on all night. But one part of this story runs the other direction, a place where the communes did not borrow medicine from the world, but gave some back. Birth. In the hospitals of 1970, birth had become an assembly line, mothers routinely sedated, fathers exiled to waiting rooms, babies whisked to nurseries behind glass. The commune women looked at all that and wanted the oldest thing instead, birth at home, awake, among their people, and out of that wanting came one of the era's genuine revolutions. Down in Tennessee, on the giant commune called the Farm, a remarkable woman named Ina Mae Gaskin and a band of self taught colleagues were delivering their community's babies and keeping meticulous records, developing a practice of patience and skill they would later publish in a book called Spiritual Midwifery, a book that helped resurrect the American midwife and whose lessons reached in time the very hospitals the movement had fled. When outside researchers eventually examined the farm's outcomes across hundreds and hundreds of births, the safety record stood up admirably, a vindication almost nobody in 1970 saw coming. Your commune's chapter of that revolution is smaller. One birth, the farmhouse, the rainy Tuesday. A midwife from the coast arrives a week early and sleeps by the stove. When the night comes, the house goes candle quiet. Water boils that nobody entirely needs. Meadow shepherds the children into the loft and tells them the whole story of it afterward, better than any of the adults could. And near dawn, through the farmhouse's old walls, the whole listening land hears it, that first, furious, brand new cry, and the porch erupts, and Amos, who happens by at milking time an hour later, leaves a blanket his late wife knitted on the gatepost without a word. They named her after the creek. Of course they did. Dirty dishes nearly broke the commune's health. A clean, loud, rainy morning birth is what everyone chose to remember instead. And honestly, who could blame them? Every commune in America was really two communes, the one that existed in July and the one that existed in January. They shared an address and almost nothing else. The July commune is the famous one, the one in the photographs and the family legends. 60 people on the land, gardens roaring, swimming hole full, music on the porch until midnight, visitors arriving daily with rucksacks and guitars. Summer is when the movement looks exactly like its own poster. Then comes October, and the visitors thin. Then November, and the rains arrive. The long Pacific rains that do not fall so much as move in. 40 days with the ridge wrapped in cloud, the dirt road gone to peanut butter, the truck chained up or parked for weeks. And by January, the 60 souls of summer are 18, and those 18 are learning what the whole experiment is actually made of. Winter is the commune's honest season. Everything soft about the dream, winter finds. It finds the woodpile first. Remember the four chords? Whatever was stacked by the equinox is what there is, and the arithmetic of it rules the whole household like a bank balance. The farmhouse contracts to 2 heated rooms. The outer cabins become ice boxes with beds in them. You sleep in a wool hat, and the water bucket by the kitchen door wears a skin of ice at dawn that must be cracked like a crust. The kerosene dusk comes down at 4:30, and the nights are 14 hours long, and there is no screen of any kind to dissolve them. There is the stove, the lamp, the same 17 faces, and time in a quantity your century never prepared you for. It finds the pantry next. This is the oatmeal season, the sprouting potato season, the season the summer's canning is counted like currency, and the last blackberry jam is opened on someone's birthday with actual ceremony. Nobody starves. Town and the granary credit, and the goats see to that. But you are hungry at some point most days, hungry in the old way, the way that makes bread holy. And it finds the people. Cabin fever is real, and communal cabin fever is real squared. The same faces at every meal. The arguments that circle back like carousel horses. The couple whose troubles the whole farmhouse can hear through the walls. The endless gray. In the loft of the barn, in the wet dark of your first February, you will hit the bottom of the entire enterprise. A night when the roof drums and your boots will not dry, and your mother's Christmas letter sits in your pocket describing a warm house with your name still on a bedroom door, and you lie awake composing the speech in which you quit. Who leaves, leaves now. Winter is when the commune population sorts itself with perfect honesty. The summer people, the beautiful ones, the ones who came for the season and the scene, are long gone by solstice, and no one blames them, and a few are dearly missed. The ones who remain, you notice, are not necessarily the truest believers. They are the workers, the ones who came for the labor itself, who would rather split wood in the rain here than be warm and supervised anywhere else. Winter does not select for ideology. It selects for people who show up at the woodpile. And then, this is the part the quitting speech never survives, winter shows you the other side of its face. Because the 18 are a different creature than the 60. Smaller, quieter, closer. Winter is when Marilyn teaches you to read water levels, and Carl finally tells the story of how they found this land. It is bread day twice a week now, the whole kitchen warm with it, and the long nights fill with the old technologies of darkness, reading aloud by lamplight, an entire novel that winter, a chapter a night argued over like scripture, mending, whittling, the guitar passed slow. It is the season of the sauna, the little cedar box by the creek that some genius raised in the fall, where on Saturday nights the whole remaining population steams itself scarlet and then runs whooping through the sleet to the water, and every grievance of the gray weeks boils out through the skin. Ask anyone who wintered on a commune what saved them. Half will say the sauna, the other half will lie. And some mornings, the ridge hands you a gift with no occasion at all. You step out before light to milk, fists jammed in your armpits, breath smoking, and overnight the fog has frozen onto every fence wire, an oak twig and dead thistle, and the first sun comes over the ridge and strikes the whole valley into white fire, a world spun from glass, utterly silent, utterly free, admission price, everything you used to own. You stand there with the empty pail, not going anywhere. The quitting speech dissolves somewhere between the gate and the barn. It always does. You will draft it again next February. Everyone does. It is as seasonal as the rains. And next February, some other impossible morning will tear it up again. Spring finds the 18 still there. Thinner, closer, slightly feral, bread rich and cash poor, and quietly certain of something the 60 of next July will never quite understand. They held the land through the dark. It is theirs now in a way no deed can describe. By now you have earned the honest question, so let us ask it plainly. If the food was beans, the work was endless, the meetings were purgatory, the winters were dark, and the whole enterprise ran on borrowed money and burst blisters. Why did anyone stay? Why did you stay? because of the good nights. And the truth the legend accidentally got right is that the good nights were real as the hepatitis and the mud, and in the final weighing heavier. Start with the music, because everything on the land eventually came back to the music. Not concerts, that is the crucial thing, not performances by professionals consumed by audiences, but music the way humans made it for 100,000 years before the radio. Participatory, nightly, communal, and frequently terrible in the most joyful way imaginable. The guitars on the porch after dinner, as reliable as the dishes. The songbook of the land, 30 or 40 tunes everyone knew in their bones. Folk standards, gospel nobody believed literally, and everybody believed some other way, and the commune's own compositions, including the ballad of the $11 cow, which gained a verse every year and was, by your last summer, an epic. You arrived unable to carry a tune in the famous bucket. Nobody cared. Within a year, you were harmonizing in the dark without thinking, and the harmonizing without thinking was the entire point. 40 voices, one firelight, no audience anywhere, because there was no one on the mountain who was not singing. Then the feasts, spaced through the year like beacons. May Day with the maypole the children demanded, and the adults pretended to indulge. The 4th of July, celebrated with heavy irony and light watermelon. The harvest feast in late September, the year's true Thanksgiving, when the long tables came out under the oaks, and the kitchen emptied its whole ambition onto them. And above all, the winter solstice, the movement's high holy day, the bonfire built all week and lit at dusk on the year's longest night, the children's pageant, the singing until the small hours, everyone leaning together in the firelight at the bottom of the year, having made together enough light to get over the hump of the dark. Some nights the beacons came to you. The commune network ran up and down the whole coast like a nervous system, painted buses and vans forever arriving from sister lands with news, seeds, recipes, gossip, and musicians. And twice a year or so the visit was an event, the night the hog farm's people rolled through, for instance. The hog farm was the movement's traveling heart, a bus-born commune famous for showing up wherever the counterculture gathered and simply feeding everyone. At the great Woodstock Festival, they had run the free kitchen and announced breakfast in bed for 400,000, and their arrival on your ridge meant a night of stone soup for 60, tall tales taller than the teepee, and the settled certainty that you belong to something much larger than one mortgage in one valley. There was a quieter religion under all of it, too. Not doctrine. The land had every faith, yet none, often in the same person, but practice, the dawn yoga on the porch that started as 3 people and became a dozen, the meditation hour, the held silence before meals that even the dogs learned. The whole culture around you would get to this eventually. The yoga studios, the mindfulness, the whole vocabulary of it waits a few decades down the road, but you got it first, at the source, at sunrise for free. And under the religion, something simpler still, and this is the one to keep. On the land, you were necessary, not employed, necessary. Every person at that table could point at the table and name their contribution to it: the bread, the milk, the carrots, the stove wood, the water line, the roof. Your labor was not abstracted into a paycheck and dissolved. It was visible, edible, warm, sitting right there, and you were seen in return known completely, gossiped about accurately, missed within hours if you so much as walked to town. In the world you came from, a person could be surrounded and invisible their whole life. Whatever else the commune failed at, and we are about to spend 2 chapters on what it failed at, it never once failed at that. Nobody on the land was invisible. Nobody was optional. The nights ended the same way, and so will this chapter. The fire down to coals, the guitars gone quiet one by one, the children carried off by the usual committee, and then the walk to your own cabin across the meadow. No flashlight, you have not needed one in years, under a sky your century stole from almost everyone, the whole Milky Way, horizon to horizon, undimmed by a single bulb for 40 miles, so dense with stars on the good nights that the familiar constellations drown in them. You stop in the wet grass every night and look up. Everyone does. 3 years in, nobody has gotten used to it, and nobody ever will. That was the pay, if you are still wondering. That was the whole compensation package: beans, blisters, music, meanin', and the entire visible universe. There were nights, many more than you would think, when it felt like the better end of the deal. And yet, by the middle of the 1970s, the great wave of communes was receding almost as fast as it had risen. Of the thousands of communities founded in those few blazing years, the overwhelming majority were gone within half a decade, dissolved, sold, abandoned, or shrunk to a single family holding the deed and the memories. Yours will be among them, and because this history has been honest so far, it will be honest here. No villain destroyed the communes. They came apart mostly from the inside, along seams we have already seen. Begin with the door that never closed, the commune's founding glory. Openness to welcome, the gate that said so, was also its slowest leak. People came, were fed, taught, loved, woven in, and left. The average stay on most communes was measured in months, and every departure took skills, labor, and a piece of everyone's heart down the road with it. The garden's hard-won knowledge kept walking away just as it ripened. The winter 18 taught the summer 60, every single year, from scratch. A community, it turns out, can survive poverty and weather almost indefinitely. What it cannot survive is being a school that graduates everyone and keeps no one. And the open door swung both ways. The great open land experiments showed the extreme. Beautiful, principled places like Morning Star and its neighbor ridge were loved half to death by sheer arrival. Hundreds upon hundreds of seekers, drifters, and lost souls on land that could carry a fraction of them, until the sanitation failed and the county came with its bulldozers, and even the founders conceded the arithmetic. Your commune's version was milder but constant. The summer flood of visitors who consumed more than they gave, the endless retraining, the weight, heavier than any mortgage, of being everyone's free landing pad. The rude old word for it was crashing. The polite modern word is unsustainable. The meetings about visitor limits were the saddest meetings the land ever held, because everyone could feel what was being voted on. The dream versus the dream's own survival. Then the money, which we have already counted honestly, it was never quite enough, and it came from sources, parents, wages, the state, that the dream itself was supposed to replace. When the truck died for good, when the tax bill jumped, when the candle market sagged, The gap always closed the same way: someone's savings, someone's family, someone's extra shifts at the mill, which points to the deepest seam of all. The load was never even. Every commune had its Carls and its Marilyns, the ones whose names were on the papers, who could not drift away when the vibe soured, who lay awake doing the arithmetic while the barn loft slept the sleep of the free. The movement called it community, the mortgage called it Carl. Founder burnout was the quiet epidemic of the whole era, and it took the strongest first. The morning in your fourth spring, when Carl, steady, engineer, calm Carl, stood up at a meeting and said simply, "I'm tired," was the morning everyone privately knew, whatever was said afterward, that the clock had started. Add the ordinary shears of human life, which no philosophy repeals. The couples that formed and broke, breaking friendships in matched sets. The ideological splits that seem small from outside and are not from inside, over money, over meat, over children's schooling, over whether the land should host the festival that trampled the lower meadow, and on some lands, a darker arrival. As the decade wore on, harder drugs seeped up some mountain roads, and communes that had been merely chaotic became unsafe, and the gentle people left first. Your ridge was largely spared that. Not every ridge was, and the movement's own survivors say so plainly. In the end, no single blow, just weather, wearing on a house built fast. For your commune, the end has a date and a room. A January meeting in your fourth winter, 14 people, the driftwood stick, and the tax bill on the table. The choice is real and mercilessly simple: sell the lower 40 acres to a neighboring rancher, or lose everything to the county sale in spring. The meeting lasts 6 hours and is, everyone will say later, the finest one ever held on the land. No blocking, no ballads, just grief handled with more grace than anyone knew the room contained. The land is sold in March, the mortgage is cleared, and something in the enterprise, some load-bearing belief, goes out with it, because a dream you have amputated to save is telling you something, and everyone hears it. People do not flee. That is not how communes end. They graduate, one couple, to a farm of their own, 2 valleys east, trained here and thriving. Tom to a carpentry crew in town, the best hire they ever made. Susan to nursing school, then a free clinic. Every departure correct, celebrated, mourned. By your last autumn, the winter population is 8, and the big house stands gray and open to the swallows, and you walk the fence line one October evening and understand, without drama, that you are not wintering again. Years later, an interviewer will ask a veteran of these years whether the communes failed, and the answer will stand for the whole movement. Failed, she says? We were a school, not a country. Schools don't fail when the students leave. That's just June. But not every light on the mountain went out, and the ones that kept burning tell us by their differences exactly what the fire needed. Travel east, first, to the red clay woods of Virginia. Twin Oaks was founded in 1967, before the Great Wave crested, by a handful of people inspired not by a guru or a festival, but of all things, by a utopian novel written by a behavioral psychologist. From the beginning, Twin Oaks committed the Great Commune heresy. It wrote things down. Its economy runs on labor credits. Every hour of work, whether milking cows, weaving hammocks, cooking dinner, or minding children, logged and weighted and balanced, so that the load the freeform communes left to guilt and goodwill is here simply visible and fair and enforced by bookkeeping rather than by burnout. Its government runs on rotating planners and managers with defined jobs. Its policies live in binders any member can read, and any member can move to change. Visiting purists from the ecstatic communes found it all faintly deflating. A revolution with a filing system. The filing system is still there. That is the punchline. While the ecstatic communes rose and burst like fireworks, Twin Oaks quietly compounded. It fed itself, built an actual business. Those rope hammocks, woven by the tens of thousands, sold across the country, bought neighboring land, buried its founders' quarrels in process, and sailed on decade after decade, 100 or so members strong, into a future almost none of its flashier cousins lived to see. The lesson is almost insultingly unromantic. The commune that survived best was the one that ran itself like an honest small business owned by everyone who worked there. Now travel south to Tennessee for the other survival story, the famous one. The farm began in 1971 as the single most audacious act of the whole movement. A caravan of dozens of painted buses, hundreds of San Francisco hippies following a teacher named Stephen Gaskin across the country to 1,000+ acres of Tennessee ridgeland, there to build a genuine spiritual village. And build it they did, on a scale no one else touched. Over 1,000 residents at the peak, their own farming operation, their own school, their own phone system, the soy dairy whose recipes traveled the world, and the midwifery practice we have already honored, delivering the community's babies by the hundreds. They even ran their own international relief organization called Plenty, which sent farm volunteers to dig wells and rebuild villages after the Great Guatemala earthquake, and in one of history's most perfect footnotes, put a crew of Tennessee hippies in the South Bronx running a free ambulance service that the city itself could not match. The people the suburbs had written off as dropouts became quite literally first responders. And then the farm nearly died of the same diseases as everyone else, just at larger scale. Too many people, too little money, debts mounting through the late 70s, the strain of pure income sharing across a small town's worth of humans. What makes the farm historic is what happened next. In 1983, in a wrenching community decision remembered simply as the changeover, it did the thing the purists called impossible. It compromised. Full communalism gave way to a dues-paying cooperative, members earning their own livings, the land held in common, the community intact, but the economics rebuilt on ground that could actually bear weight. Population fell hard. The dream was renegotiated in grief and argument. But the farm is still there, on the same land, half a century on, smaller, solvent, gray-haired and second generation, midwives still catching babies in the same Tennessee hills. It survived by proving that a dream, like a garden, sometimes lives only if you are willing to prune it to the root and let it regrow in a hardier shape. There are others, scattered like the last coals of the Great Fire, communities that made it on a craft business, or a shared faith with actual structure, or a trust that took the land off the speculative market forever. And there is the strangest survivor of all, the idea itself. The commune wave receded, but it left behind a permanent archipelago. The intentional communities movement, with its directories and networks that continue to this day, and a gentler descendant called co-housing, private homes clustered around shared meals and common houses that took the commune's warmest discovery, nobody should be invisible, and rebuilt it in a form with dishwashers and clear bylaws. Your grandchildren may live in one and never know what it descends from. Lay the survivors side by side, and the pattern is almost embarrassingly clear. What lasted was never the purest vision or the brightest fire. What lasted was structure holding the fire, fair systems for work, honest systems for money, doors that could sometimes say no, rules written down where everyone could read them, and at the center, carefully protected by all that unromantic scaffolding, the same warm thing your commune had for 4 years and could not keep: the long table, the shared land, the certainty of being necessary. The 60s dreamed the fire. The survivors, bless them, learned to build the stove. It is many years later now, decades in fact. You are standing in a kitchen with electric light and running water, miracles you have never again taken entirely for granted, and you are baking bread, whole wheat, from the recipe in a water swollen book you have owned since a Zen cookbook taught your whole generation to bake. Your hands know the dough the way they once knew the maul and the milking rhythm, from somewhere below thought. And while the loaves rise, this history can settle its accounts. Because here is the great joke of the commune movement, the one it took the whole culture 50 years to get. The communes died, and almost everything they practiced lived. Walk through any American supermarket of the future, your present, and you are walking through the commune kitchen with better lighting. The granola, the yogurt, the whole grain bread, the tofu and soy milk in their neat cartons, the entire natural foods aisle, all of it once had to be made by hand in farmhouses like yours, or bought from the food conspiracies and scruffy co-ops the movement improvised because no store would stock such things. Those buying clubs became the co-ops. The co-ops taught the supermarkets. The commune's poverty food conquered the shelves. The organic produce section, with its certifications and its price premiums, grew directly from those fenced too-late gardens, the compost worship, the horror of spray, the soil built by hand and Amos's manure. The farmer's market where you shop on Saturdays, the little tables of honey and greens and honest bread. You have been to that market before. You sold cheese at it, underpriced, barefoot, in 1972. The reach goes further than foods. The recycling bin at your curb, the solar panels on your neighbor's roof, direct descendants of the improvised collectors bolted onto hippie shacks while the utilities scoffed. Earth Day and the whole grammar of environmental conscience, drafted in no small part by people who had hauled their own water and could never again pretend it came from nowhere. The yoga schedule at the local gym, the meditation app on your grandchild's phone, the sunrise porch practice, mass-produced. The midwife who caught your granddaughter in a hospital birthing room with dim lights and family present, practicing a profession that communes helped resurrect from near extinction. Even the language everyone now speaks without thinking, natural, organic, community, sustainable, wellness, is commune English, loaned permanently to the whole culture. None of this arrived with the revolution's trumpets. It seeped. The movement lost every battle it announced, and won a startling share of the ones it never declared. The communes set out to secede from America. Instead, patiently, invisibly, Through recipes and gardens and birth rooms, they seasoned it. And what did you carry home, personally, down that dirt road at the end? Competence, first, the quiet dowry of the land. You can split wood, bake bread, mend a fence, calm a goat, read weather, keep a fire overnight, and sit in a hard meeting without flinching. And every one of those skills has paid you all your life in a currency banks do not recognize. Patience with process, a permanent gentleness with beginners, an incurable habit of looking at any group of strangers and beginning automatically to imagine the chore wheel. The people, of course, scattered like seed at the end, the way commune people were, but seeds grow. Tom built houses for 40 years and built your porch for free. Susan nursed 3 towns worth of babies. Meadow, solemn, sovereign Meadow, runs an organic farm 2 states away with her daughter and sends you a Christmas card every year with one line, always the same line, their old joke: close the gate, goats. You have lost some of them now, down the longest road, and when commune people gather for those goodbyes, the singing is still in harmony. Nobody has to think about it. That was always the point. And the land itself, one last time. You drove up there once, years back, with your grandchildren, on a road long since paved. The gate is different now. The sign is gone. The dome is gone entirely. Rain wins in the end. It always did. The big house was finally finished by whoever came after, which made you laugh out loud, alone in the car. But the farmhouse stands, gray and dignified under the same oaks. The well still gives water. You could see the pump from the road. And along the south slope, in ordered rows gone shaggy with age, the orchard was blooming. The apple trees the commune planted your last spring on faith, knowing full well that whoever ate from them would be strangers. You stood at the fence in the spring wind, an old person full of history, and watched the petals move. The country you tried to found lasted 4 years. The world you helped season is the one everyone lives in now, and the trees you planted for strangers are still feeding them, which is when you finally weigh it all on a drowsy night like this one, not a bad harvest at all. Not bad at all. Let that be the last image, traveler, as the bread scents the kitchen and your breathing slows. An orchard on a green hillside, planted by the young for the unknown, blooming anyway, blooming still. The meadow is dark now. The stove is ticking. The stars are out over the ridge. All of them. Sleep now. Thank you for walking up that dirt road with me tonight, for the beans and the blisters, the meetings and the music, the winter and the well. If this journey helped you drift, the comments are always open for your own family's stories from those years. And there are many more nights of history waiting for you on this channel whenever sleep is slow to come. The lamp is out, the fire is low, the land is quiet. Rest easy, sleep well. This is Drowsy History.